The thing that Michael Schmidt reports here, though, in this new book that is most unnerving, though, is directly about the president himself. And it's something that we all thought had happened, but it hasn't. And ever since I got a hold of Schmidt's book, knowing that I was going to be able to interview him about this tonight, again, the book comes out tomorrow, I have tossed and turned about this because I find this very upsetting and unsettling. Here's the major news here. This is from, I'll quote Schmidt directly here. Quote, "It would take me a year to put together the pieces of what I believe is one of the most important parts of the Mueller report, what it did not contain. Back in May 2017, the FBI had opened a two-pronged investigation into whether Trump obstructed justice and whether he was a Russian agent. When Mueller took over the investigation, the acting FBI director, Andy McCabe, had briefed him on this. Over nearly 200 pages, Mueller's team took on the question of whether Trump had obstructed justice. But nowhere in the unredacted version of the report was there a thorough examination of Trump's ties to Russia. The report said nothing about whether Trump posed a threat to national security or whether his longstanding ties to Russia were problematic." Schmidt says, quote, "In reporting for this book, I spoke to several people involved in the Mueller investigation. They told me that investigators never undertook a significant examination of Trump's personal and business ties to Russia. For instance, they said investigators knew of financial documents that might show Trump's ties to Russia, but they never pursued them." Mueller didn't explain himself along these lines. If the American public or official Washington had expected the Mueller investigation to answer questions of the president's loyalties that only a counterintelligence investigation could answer, it would not. In reporting for this book, Schmidt says, I discovered why. In May 2017, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had appointed Robert Mueller to pick up where acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe and the FBI had left off in their two investigations, the obstruction investigation and the counterintelligence investigation. But in handing off the investigation from McCabe and the FBI to Mueller, Rod Rosenstein had suspended the counterintelligence investigation into Trump. Again, this is the investigation basically into whether Trump is a foreign agent, whether he is compromised by a hostile foreign power. According to Michael Schmidt's new book, Rod Rosenstein called off that part of the investigation. Rosenstein, quote, believed that the decision by McCabe and top counterintelligence investigators at the FBI to open the inquiry into whether Trump was a Russian agent in the first place had been precipitous and premature. Without informing McCabe, Rosenstein told Mueller that his investigation should concentrate on whether crimes were committed. It should not be a fishing expedition into whether President Trump was a Russian agent. If Mueller's prosecutors wanted to expand their investigation, they could come back to Rosenstein and ask for the authority to do so. But Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had foreclosed any deeper inquiry before the investigation even began. Just trying to factor this into what we have learned over the past few years, right? I mean, there has been public reporting, right, that we've all been aware of for years now, that the FBI opened a criminal investigation into the Russian interference in our election and a counterintelligence investigation into, bluntly, whether the president is or was a Russian agent, whether the president is doing the bidding of a hostile foreign power, whether they either have leverage over him or he has otherwise signed up with them. When that second investigation didn't turn up in the Mueller report, we assumed that Mueller hadn't done it, but that investigation had been continued by the FBI outside of Mueller's purview. Indeed, on page 13 of the Mueller report, Mueller and his team said that any counterintelligence stuff that they turned up over the course of their investigation, they fed back to the FBI for the FBI to handle it on their own, separate and apart from what Mueller were doing. But now in this book, Michael Schmidt from the New York Times reports that Mueller didn't investigate the president's ties to Russia and whether he was compromised, including by any financial involved with them. But neither did the FBI. Rosenstein told them they couldn't do it, and so they didn't do it either. The FBI apparently thought that Mueller was doing it. Mueller thought that the FBI was doing it. Nobody did it. Salient intelligence report we just learned 2 weeks ago didn't look at it either. Nobody's done it. All these years in, no entity of the U.S. government has ever investigated whether the president is compromised by his relationship with Russia. All these years in. Why not?